What New Year's resolutions should the Dallas Cowboys be making in 2025? We'll discuss that and more on this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. It is our last episode of 2024.
That's crazy.
So, of course, we're going to do a mailbag episode. And our first question comes from Evan, a longtime listener of the show. He wants to know, give us a couple Dallas Cowboys football New Year's resolutions.
Man, that's a good. I mean, obviously a great one, very timely. Happy New Year's to everyone, obviously, as well. I think the first one for me would be, and we kind of talked about this a little bit in some form or fashion in other ways, is that I would love to see the Cowboys to start out just being more honest with themselves and with their fans about, just expectations about what's going on. I think, there's always been an aspect, obviously, of Jerry, the salesman, and him trying to upsell everyone on the season and spinning this and spinning that. I think this is the year that they really broke it, right? They really they went too far and just went from being salesmen and spinning things to kind of just outright deceiving folks about like kind of what the focus and the goal of the season was. And I think that kind of leads into my next one, which is I would love to see the Cowboys kind of have a change of heart about some of their spending ways, right? Like I think, and maybe this what happened this year is going to help them kind of change their heart. Oh, maybe just a little bit, but even a little bit would help. Just seeing them kind of go out and being a little bit more aggressive in the free agent market. I think again, much like many of our own New Year's resolutions, they take it on for about a week or two of trying to kick it around and then drop
good,
it.
That's 2 weeks more than last year. That'd be fine with
me. Exactly. So, but I those are my two things is, kind of being more straightforward about the kind of goal of the season and not trying to sell us a Super Bowl season when you're clearly trying to get some things done with your cap and clear some things off and reset things. And then just maybe, not being too afraid to kind of kick in a little bit of extra money to kind of get the help you need. Even if it doesn't work out great, at least you put that effort in there and it felt like you were going for it. When you say things like you're going for it this season. Yeah.
I think the messaging by Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones was wrong from the get-go, right? I mean, Jerry used the word all in, and everybody assumed that meant that they were going to be aggressive this offseason, going all in for the season. And that wasn't the case. What Jerry really meant is he's all in with the current roster.
The group, yeah.
Yeah, and that messaging ended up setting a really bad tone for the entire offseason and going into the year. And when the Cowboys struggled, everybody pointed to Jerry Jones. I really agree about the being honest part, because I was listening to an interview from Jerry Jones. I think it might have been Sunday or before the game, and he was talking about how injuries derailed their season, and that wasn't really the case. Yes, they had injuries this year. There's absolutely no doubt. By the middle part of the season, they were decimated by injuries. But that's not why they lost to the Saints. It's not why they lost to the Ravens.
No,
it's not why. And I don't want people to think that this season was bad only because of the injuries. Obviously, they were terrible, but they were getting smoked in games where they were fully healthy. That can't happen in 2025. So I'm really hoping the Joneses don't think, hey, if we were just healthy, we would have been fine. We would have gotten things together at the end point of the year. They need to be honest with themselves about where this roster is going into the new year.
Yeah, and I think that, likely what you're going to see them try to convince themselves into saying is that, yes, it wasn't working, but Zimmer was kind of in transition. You had young offensive line. And those things are true, and those things are contributors to why they were bad early. But the fact of the matter is that, you should have had other aspects of your team that could counterbalance that to carry the weight of being, weak at those spots early, so that you can get through that early part of the season, and so that when the defense comes around and starts playing like it did at the end of the season, and when Cooper Beebe and unfortunately Tyler Guyton, because of injuries, didn't quite get where you needed him to. When Beebe and some other younger guys are able to kind of get their feet underneath them a little bit better on the offensive line, and the run game starts playing better, then you're in a position to do, to actually make a run. But the problem is that the early part of the season was so destructive to not only your psyche but your record. You didn't have a way to kind of lean on another aspect of your offense or lean on a different part of your defense, because you didn't have maybe that extra element on offense when CeeDee Lamb wasn't quite ready to be the guy yet early. So I think that's what you hope that the lesson that they learn is, man, we need to have a little bit more on this team just to kind of make sure that if something goes wrong in an area that we're expecting to be good, we've got some other way to kind of shift the focus and have them carry the load until some of our younger players can catch on and get a little bit better.
One of the New Year's resolutions I have for the Cowboys this year, and I'm trying to think about how the right way to say this is, but I'd like to see the Cowboys have more of an edge. And I think that means by finding more players that have a little bit of that dog mentality in them. I think the Cowboys have a couple. I think Jordan Lewis is the perfect example. He's not a Pro Bowl player. Maybe he should be an all-pro slot player, but like a non-star player that helps provide you some of that toughness. I watching that Lions game last night, like former Dallas Cowboy Dan Skipper gives them some of that toughness when they get into short yardage. Or Jaywan Jennings, the receiver for the 49ers, who's like the third receiver that'll come in and block his tail off and gives you some added toughness. I would like to see the Cowboys add 2 or 3 guys, whether it's at tight end, linebacker, safety, that just gives them some of that energy that I think in some games they just lack this year.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things is that if you think that you can get Hoffman there, right? Like as far as physically and skill wise at the position, I mean, he obviously brings that, and that's that and his intelligence is why that coaching staff is so interested in trying to make him work, right? Is because I think they realize that too. I would suggest, I mean, you said it in the position and kind of in a veiled way, but I think the fact that Ferguson had the kind of disappointing season that he did, I think is feeding into that problem, right? Because to me, going into this year, it was Ferguson that was that kind of emotional, like, physical edge player that you're looking for to kind of, set the physical tone. But because he just was injured and he wasn't, performing quite at the level that he had previously, it just didn't have the same kind of effect.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be a superstar. I mean, I think Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is maybe like the highest version of that. Now, he obviously there'll be games he takes it too far, but I do think.
But that's it, right? That's
right, and I think that defense plays off of his energy. And there are a couple of guys on these playoff teams, and you'll see it in the postseason where they just feed off of some of the role players' energy and toughness and physicality, and they want to turn games into a fist fight. And yes, so you have to control that and manage it. But I'd rather say, I'm going to use a Mike Tomlin phrase. Really do. I'd rather say whoa than sick them, right? Like I'd rather tell these guys to hold back a little bit than trying to force them to be aggressive. I think too often the Cowboys have not had enough of those guys with that kind of raw edge that you need sometimes when you're going up against better teams.
I'll throw out another guy who I feel like is developing that, and I can't wait to see if it kind of really turns the corner and really becomes a thing with him next year, is Maris Leofau.
I agree.
He plays with a level of physicality and a level of kind of hair on fire and just like an edge a little bit. And he's a young player. He's still kind of getting his feet underneath him, still learning the position. So maybe he doesn't quite feel like that level of comfort to do that. But you saw it in Notre Dame a little bit when he was playing with them. I think you're seeing a little bit more as time goes on there. I think he could definitely be a guy that could be one of those dogs, right? That and I think Jordan Lewis, like the best example of Jordan Lewis is just like he's the player that's on your team that every other team talks about. Man, I hate that guy.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
I like, it's Amon St. Brown. It's Amon St. Brown saying, I hate playing against Jordan Lewis. I hate that dude.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of guy you need on this team, just to kind of bring that attitude.
I just want the Cowboys to be a little bit more tougher, and not to say that they are a mentally weak team, but I want them to be the team that feels like they are the bully going into all of these games. We'll see if they can get there. Let's talk about Ben Johnson, who put on an absolute clinic last night in a meaningless game. Is he a realistic option for the Dallas Cowboys? We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions that you forgot about or that you are paying for twice? It definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize that I was still paying for, but Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel unwanted subscriptions. It'll monitor your spending and it'll help you lower your bills so that you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals that you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/LockedOn today. That is rocketmoney.com/LockedOn. rocketmoney.com/LockedOn. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Well, and I want to talk about Ben Johnson because I was watching that game last night. Detroit had nothing to play for. I thought it was foolish for the Lions to even play their starters because the game literally meant nothing. They have their biggest game of the season in 6 days. But Dan Campbell and Ben Johnson played everybody and they put on a show. Watching that game, I kind of came to the realization that I have mixed feelings on Mike McCarthy coming back, but if the Cowboys bring him back, I think most Cowboy fans will not be excited about the 2025 season. It'll be more of the same from what we saw last year. But if they were able to get someone like Ben Johnson, I think you would see a lot of excitement surrounding the Cowboys. So our question from Goran is, which would be more damaging for the image of the franchise? Mike McCarthy coming back despite mostly fan disapproval, or letting Mike McCarthy walk only to pursue and get turned down by Ben Johnson?
Man, that's a great question. And that's actually not even how I read that question when we were talking about a pre-show. That's really interestingly phrased. I think that
I think it would be really bad if the Cowboys let go of Mike McCarthy, went and pursued Ben Johnson and had an interview, and it came out that Ben Johnson just did not like what he heard in the interview, right?
I think that's what my initial thought was, but honestly, like, I don't know. Like, I think there's something to, and listen, this goes back to my thoughts about before the season. I just want to see the Cowboys do something big, right? And so I think it would be embarrassing. There's no doubt. Like, if you let Mike walk and then you go and you try to get Ben and he's not interested, I think it would be embarrassing. But I also think, it would be a lot easier for us to say, well, you know what? At least they did something. At least they went out and tried to, like, go and they make a change. They went out and interviewed the guy that we all wanted. It's not our fault necessarily, or it maybe it's a little bit of the Joneses' fault, but I don't even know how much that's true. Like, that Ben Johnson wouldn't necessarily want to come to the Cowboys, but I think the fact that they had a willingness to do that and they were willing to make the move. I mean, at least if as someone who reports on the team, I think that's how I would view it. Is, yeah, it's disappointing, but at the very least, you have to love the process as opposed to what was expected of the process in this offseason. So I don't know. I think it's probably about the same. I think there would just be a level of neutrality. Like, I think people would just be like, fine. And just, like about Mike McCarthy, if they re-signed him, I think it would. I think there would be some people that will be really upset, obviously, and I think there will be some people that will be like, it's the best that you can do, or whatever, kind of a general malaise about it. But I just don't know that there would be. It's just not going to be. It's going to be neutral to uncaring, I think, right? I think if you do the Ben Johnson thing, you're making an effort. Like, at least you're trying to do something to change the situation. And I think that process would at least make me happy. And maybe it opens it up for you to go get, somebody else that maybe you go get Liam Cohen, or, you know what I'm saying? Like,
sure.
There's still other guys out there that are of the same ilk that would be positive, upgrades in the offensive play calling area.
I think Ben Johnson is probably the most sought after first-year coaching candidate since Kyle Shanahan back in 2017, probably.
Yeah.
And I thought at the time, I mean, the Cowboys, they won 13 games with Jason Garrett that year. I thought they did a disservice by not interviewing Kyle Shanahan for that job, because Kyle Shanahan's track record was unbelievable, right? But they decided to hold on to Jason Garrett. I think you would be doing a disservice to yourself, especially in a year where Mike McCarthy's contract is going to expire. Like, you don't even have to fire him. You can just let it expire and say, hey, we want to interview Ben Johnson. Let's go do that as soon as the season ends. I'm with you. Like, I don't have any problem with them bringing Mike McCarthy back. At the same time, I would be pretty upset if they didn't at least explore the option of Ben Johnson. And if it doesn't work out, you interview Liam Cohen. You interview Brian Flores, maybe, or whoever. Josh McCown, the Texans offense. No, sorry, the Texans is the Lions offensive coordinator now. Josh McCown,
I think, isn't he with the Lions still, or he might have moved on with someone else? Yeah, but McCown's. Oh, he might was he the Saints?
I don't know. That's Kubiak.
Oh, okay, yeah. Sorry, McCown's moved around a lot. We're obviously been a quarterback for a lot of different teams, and now the sought after assistant who. Was being quarterback coach for the Vikings. I knew it was somewhat. Okay, it's one of the contenders. Yeah, but he's just a guy whose name has been bandied about as a head coaching candidate, like since he was up, almost barely being finished being a player. Exactly. So definitely someone whose name is being thrown.
Yeah, I just think these options, and again, even if Dallas doesn't get Ben Johnson, I think Cowboy fans would at least appreciate the effort. And I think there are a lot of fans out there that would just feel frustrated if they didn't do a thorough search, and maybe they end up right back with Mike McCarthy. We'll see.
You can't always dictate outcomes, right? But you can dictate your effort, like, and what you're trying to do. And I think if I would like it's just like what I was saying with the Cowboys at the end of last year, with the after the Packers game. It was like, I would just like for them to recognize that something different needs to be done, that something needs to change, like, and that it's not just a small thing. So that's why then I was asking for just some kind of change to understand that there was something problematic about what happened, whether it be like at the time it was moving on from Dak or changing the head coach or something. I think we've arrived back at the same spot here. I'm okay with Mike McCarthy being the coach because I think he provides a decent floor, but I would be much more thrilled to risk having a 3-13 season with a new head coach that we don't know how it's going to work out, just because we need to see a change of approach. We need to see something different to try to break through, and an effort would be at least an effort. And I can't get mad at the result, because that's not always something they can dictate.
Last thing, we've had a lot of reports over the last 2 weeks that other teams would be interested in Mike McCarthy if the Cowboys let him go. Do you think that's legit, or do you think that's Mike McCarthy's agent doing some work to try to create a sense of urgency to get a deal done maybe a week after the season ends, so the Cowboys don't go out and explore other options like a Ben Johnson, a Mike Vrabel, whoever?
It's got to be both, right? Like, I mean, honestly, I think that there's a reason that, yes, I think his agent is going. I think he's got a great agent, and he's going around and telling everybody to talk up Mike McCarthy and talk about what a great coach is and how interested other teams are. I do think that is happening, but I also think that teams would be dumb to not at least look at Mike McCarthy. I mean, look, again, he's not being fired for doing a terrible job. He's just being fired for not doing a good enough job.
Well, actually, he's not even being fired. He's just
that's true. That's true.
Right?
It's just exactly. He's not being retained or whatever, however you want to phrase it, because he's done a terrible job or he's had done something that's a fireable offense necessarily. He's being let go or not retained because they didn't do what they didn't reach the very high goal that the Cowboys have set for themselves. So if you're a team that's looking to stabilize your franchise, to just build a program or kind of just rebuild or get your floor up on your franchise, I can't honestly. I think what Mike McCarthy has done in the 3 years previous to this didn't get us where we wanted to go. But as far as like being a head coach who can manage a team and deal with a almost impossible situation with the Cowboys ownership, I think he's done a very impressive job. And if I was an owner, I would certainly be considering him. I don't know if he's definitely my top candidate, but he's probably in most of these teams' top 5 candidate lists, right?
Right.
Yeah,
he's a must interview.
Exactly.
I just think I don't think there's a lot right now the Cowboys can do this offseason that would get the fan base really excited going into 2025 and beyond. I do think adding someone like Ben Johnson or even Liam Cohen would just give this team a newfound sense of energy. And maybe that's what they need to kind of jumpstart the franchise a little bit. We'll see if that comes to fruition over the next couple of weeks.
Real quick. I'll say that may be the reason that if it does actually happen, which I don't think it will, but if it does actually happen, that is probably maybe the reason that it was, because Jerry realizes that the fan base won't be excited unless something big changes, and then maybe that pushes him to make the change.
If Jerry feels like there's a sense of apathy around his team, he will make a change, right? And I think
that could be the thing.
And truthfully, and I think one of the reasons why he hasn't said anything on record yet is I think he wants to see what Week 18 looks like. Like if it's all Commanders fans and the Cowboys get blown out again, and it's just not a good product, I wouldn't be surprised, as silly as it seems, a meaningless Week 18 game for Dallas and Washington ends up deciding Mike McCarthy's future. Wouldn't surprise me.
It's just that close, It's that close. So it could be.
All right, let's talk about the tight end position. Is it a sneaky need for the Cowboys going into the offseason? We will get to that next. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen every single day. For your second listen, go check out the new Locked On NFL show. 2 shows every single day, one in the morning with Tyler Rowland, one in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins, available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Landon, our last question here comes from Gigi's Bro. Fun name. Do you think tight end is a slept-on need for the team whether it's through free agency or the draft?
Yeah, actually, you and I were just talking about this recently a little bit, and I don't know if we're quite there yet, I guess, where it's a need, It's an interesting position, right? Because you have 4 guys who, at least 3 guys, depending on how you look at it, that you really like, I think, as tight ends. But I think the question is, do you have enough at the position overall, like in a playmaking sense, based on what we saw from Ferguson, right? Because we just talked about it last episode. We expected Ferguson to take a big step forward. Feels like he took a big step backwards. So does that kind of put us back into the category of, hey, you need a playmaker at the position? And I think my answer to this is the Cowboys need an offensive playmaker. Like if you find one that's at the tight end position and you go draft him, fantastic. But I don't know that I feel like I'm having to go draft. I'm having to go draft a tight end. Period. First of all, or certainly in the first and second round, right? Like I think I certainly can be convinced that Ferguson can get back to where he was the year before, because I do believe that this was a down bad year for Ferguson. I do have faith that I think he will come back and be at least closer to what he was last year. The problem with that is that we actually need him to be a step beyond where he was last year. So I think if you find a guy that that can probably come in and make an impact, and I have to be honest, I haven't studied the tight end group this year. I know that there's a kid in Michigan that's really good. but which I laughed a lot at when I saw, because I was like, man, are we going to have this whole other Mason Graham conversation with this tight end for Michigan as well? But listen, I think unless it's a guy that you feel like can come in and be a playmaker right away, there certainly isn't like a need to fill another tight end body when you've got all the guys that you've already got. And I think that the other thing about that is that it's a tough position unless you're, Bowers, right, to come in and have an impact in your rookie year. I think you have to be a kind of special athlete, a move tight end, half receiver type in order to have that kind of impact. And the last thing, I'm sorry, Stevens, is that you have a guy in the wings. I know he's tore his ACL 2 years in a row, but I think you've got a guy who can be add a little bit more of a weapon aspect to the position. I don't know if it's enough to be tight end one, but I think he can at least add a little bit more to the receiving production aspect of the tight end group overall. If once he comes back and is healthy.
I think my answer on the tight end position depends on where the tight end is in the slotting of value in offense. Because I think under Dak over the last couple of years, I would say your CeeDee Lamb is option number one. And in most cases, Ferguson or tight end one has been the second option in the passing game, right? Yeah. And then Jalen Tolbert, Brandon Cooks, and those guys kind of fill in. If the offense wants to continue to function that way, and I have no problem making your tight end the number two option, then I think you need to get somebody that's more dynamic than Ferguson. He just wasn't very good after the catch this year. I was watching a game from 2023 last year. He was so much lighter and leaner last year, and you can see it. Like the difference in explosiveness was night and day. Now he bulked up because he wanted to become a more full-time player, and I think that hurt him this year, right? So if you want your offense to be run through your tight end, I think you need to get somebody more dynamic there. But if you add another receiver in the draft, maybe you grab somebody in the first round and your tight end is your third or fourth option in the passing attack, I think Ferguson and Schoonmaker are fine options. I was hoping that Ferguson would have the type of year this year where the Cowboys would feel like, hey, let's go extend this guy this offseason.
Yeah.
Let's lock him up. He's going to be our tight end for the next 4 years. After this year, it's like, I want to see Ferguson play on the final year of his contract and show me that he can be something more than what we saw even in 2023. He just hasn't gotten there yet.
Yeah, and honestly, like I think it's time for us to recognize that this seems to happen to the Cowboys a lot, right? Where they have guys that they want to re-sign early, who then have a problematic year before their contract year, and then have a big contract year, and now suddenly the Cowboys are paying for uncertainty and overpaying. So yeah, I don't disagree. Like I think it matters who the play caller is. It matters, like where the wide receiver, where the tight end is in the focus of the receiving group. And I think that those all things, I'd like to see Ferguson slim back down, right? Yeah. And I think he's
not a good blocker anyways at 255 pounds. So just go out and be a much better athlete.
And I think that you've got something in Brevin Spanford, and I think you've got something in Schoonmaker as more of the blocker two-way kind of guys. Just you can use Ferguson as more of your move tight end, like what receiving tight end, and still have him be the guy that's the main snap getter for this. So I just think that they need to find an offensive playmaker in general, and then make that offensive playmaker the kind of secondary weapon in this offense. Yes. If that's a tight end, fantastic. If it's a wide receiver, then just slot Ferguson down a little bit in his role, and then let's roll.
I look at somebody like Dallas Goedert. I think Ferguson can be a Dallas Goedert type of player. Like he's in that mold of tight end, but he's not the second option in the passing game. It's Devontae Smith, and that allows Goddard to have very favorable matchups. I think if Goddard was the only other guy playing with A.J. Brown, I think you would see him get exposed a little bit more than what he is. But again, if the Cowboys can find their version of Devontae Smith or Hawkinson or whoever this offseason, tight end just isn't a huge need for me. But I'm also always looking to see like, hey, is there a guy out there that can run in the low 4.5s and they can make plays after the catch? Because I do think, like, you look historically at like the Super Bowls over the last decades, Travis Kelce, George Kittle, and Rob Gronkowski have played in a lot of Super Bowls. And I know the quarterbacks have been good that have been throwing them the ball, but when you have a dynamic tight end in the middle of the field, it can really change how you play offense.
Yeah, and I think that's a good example too. Is that Kittle's I think he's the main target getter, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, basically
for the 49ers. So it's and I don't think that Ferguson is that guy. He's just not. He's not in that tier, right?
He's not the athlete that Kittle is. No.
So I think part of the issue is just being appropriate with where you're deploying him in the hierarchy of receiving. Correct. So as long as the Cowboys are conscious of that, I think Ferguson can continue to be the tight end, and you can roll with the group that you've got. It's just more about, hey, Ferguson's not your second weapon in the offense. He's just not that guy. Yeah. So let's get somebody in here who can be that guy, and then kind of slot Ferguson into a more appropriate targeting kind of layer as opposed to being, hey, when CeeDee's not here, you're the man. I think that's a bridge too far for him.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen of the day and your first listen all year. I know this is a tough year for Cowboy fans, but we appreciate you guys listening to us every single day. Go check out the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. We are off on Wednesday. Thursday, we'll have a crossover show with David Harrison. I'm sure he's as giddy as could be about this Commander season. We'll knock him down a peg. Don't worry.
That's right. We'll remind him who won this last game, right?
Yeah, I'll do my best. Friday will be our preview show. Make sure you tune in for that. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus _Mosier. Enjoy the new year. We'll see you right back here on Thursday.